Well, I actually run a think tank called StraConsult, which is both a think tank and a consulting firm. And I'm also the chairman of SIATINI, which is the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Initiative and Networking, which is very much focused on international trade issues, international and regional trade issues. The think tank StraConsult is very much focused on developmental questions in Africa, in the Indian Ocean region, but also generally in Eastern and Southern Africa. Well, economic integration is happening, but at different pace in different regions. We cannot say that the continent itself is now reached a great level of integration. But there are some regions, namely Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, a little bit in West Africa, that have gone a long way into integration at different levels. The trade integration between a number of countries, between about 22 countries out of the 54, has progressed a long way. As you will know, right now, there are negotiations to conclude what is called the tripartite, which is a combination between the East African Community, COMESA, and SADC. Integration in terms of infrastructure is very heavy and is progressing in Southern Africa, especially on the energy question. They have regional grids and they have regional projects in energy. But as I say, it's not progressing at the same pace in all the regions, right? It will take its own time. Well, let me start with that last element. I make a distinction between democracy as defined in the Western parlance, which is multipartyism and regular elections every 5 years, and governance. Yes, democracy is progressing in Africa. We've seen over the last 15 years more and more countries going into democratic processes and democratic outcomes, but we are lagging behind. However, for me, that is secondary. I know I will shock people by saying that. What is more important is good governance. And good governance can happen, and history has shown countries like Korea, countries like Singapore, etc., can have extremely good governance even if the full spectrum of democratic processes and democratic practices as the West defines it are not quite there, right? I mean, I'm sitting now in Morocco. Morocco is a good example also. This democracy has been progressing over the decades, but its governance has been extremely good, and that's why Morocco is one of the most advanced countries in Africa. So, good governance is extremely important. Again, there are some countries that have moved a long way into having proper governance, good governance in terms of socio-economic development. There are some countries that are lagging behind, and there are a few countries, fewer and fewer, thank God, that unfortunately are still in conflict situation. I underline that because very often for people looking at the continent from outside, they tend to look at the continent as one country. This continent is huge, it's got 54 countries, and all the countries are not moving at the same pace. However, what is positive is that there's a growing number of countries that is now driving growth, driving economic development, driving social development on the continent. And these countries are spread all over, in East Africa, in the Horn, in Western Africa, in Northern Africa, and in Southern Africa. There are weak countries, there are strong countries. Now, with respect to the issue of governance, I think there are some issues where the government still have to do some serious thinking, and I'll name two. Namely, the question of diversifying the economy, basically on manufacturing, but secondly and more importantly, because that's the most abundant resource of Africa, it's not gold, it's not diamond, it's not oil, it's land. It's land, it's the agrarian economy. I think we still have a lot of work to do to modernize the agrarian economy, which can feed the continent, which can feed part of the world, where investment is required, both domestic and foreign investment, which can also contribute to the value chain in manufacturing. Well, that's the wrong policy. There is no country in history, no strong country in the world that can have sustainable economic development if it doesn't have a domestic class of strong entrepreneurs. Therefore, this entire focus and fallacy of looking only at FDI, foreign direct investment, needs now to be revisited and corrected in terms of putting measures that will favor the emergence of a domestic entrepreneurial class. Some countries, and I'll name one, Ethiopia, for example, Ethiopia has done just that. And that's why Ethiopia is one of the countries that have known sustained high growth for the last 10 years. Kenya is also doing that. But some countries are still in the mindset, too much dependent on waiting for foreign investment to come. And for domestic investment to come up, for domestic entrepreneurs to come up, governments need to look beyond just the issue of fiscal measures. They need to look at the business environment and monetary policy with respect to credit, access to finance, and the conditions of access to credit. Well, I'm hoping that the mindset is changing in most countries. For too long, what I call the glamorous sector, right? The glamorous sector being mining, from gold, diamond, oil, etc., has been too much the only focus, right? But most governments forget one thing, that the most important yardstick to evaluate development is not the creation of wealth, it is the creation of jobs. It is the creation of employment. So, while natural resources do create wealth, they do not create jobs. If I take a country like Namibia, which has got diamonds, which has got uranium, which has got fantastic resources, it's got 40% unemployment. Because it doesn't have a diversified economy, it doesn't have an industrial base, and the agrarian economy is not developed enough. So yes, some countries have started to understand that while they have that focus on mineral resources, They need to use the wealth created by the natural resources to diversify their economies. Again, the Ethiopian example is a real eye-opener. Ethiopia doesn't have natural resources, but Ethiopia is the highest growing economy in Africa. Well, I think this conference is momentous. It is extremely important in the sense that there are two issues that Africans need to address. One, who generate ideas for us? Is it ourselves, or is it others that are generating ideas and feeding us? Secondly, we are in the world in the realm of a battle of ideas. That's part of the relationship between nations. Domination of one nation on the other, on one nation, on part of the world, is not just economic. It's also in terms of ideas and information. And it relates also to who our policymakers listen to. So this conference for me is extremely important in bringing us together to think about how our think tanks can be more effective in this battle of ideas, can be more visible in this battle of ideas, and puts to us a number of challenges in terms of relevance, in terms of effectiveness, and in terms of visibility. Job creation.